It's already on? Sounds good. How are you, sir? Finally. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As we begin, I do want to take just a few moments to recognize the executive leadership team here at the Kentucky Department of Education. So would our executive leadership team members please stand? This is a phenomenal group of folks who lead the work that we do here at the Kentucky Department of Education. We have a really great mix of leaders, some of them who've been at the department for quite some time, some who are new to the department, several who are not new to the department but new to their roles, and I rely on them extensively. So I'm really thankful for you guys for being here. And thankful for the work that you guys do. I'd also like to recognize the members of the Kentucky Board of Education who are here this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please stand? Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for the incredible honor of being able to serve as this Commonwealth Commissioner of Education, and for your continued support as we do the work that we're called to do for the kids in this state. We're thankful for you being here. I would like to begin, before we get into the details of the slides, just with sharing with you a little bit of reflection that I often find myself doing. I started teaching at a pretty young age. As many of you know, I did not pursue an undergraduate degree in education. I went through an alternative route to teacher certification after I'd earned a master's degree. So I went through the University of New Orleans to pursue that credential and started teaching in the New Orleans public schools. And what became readily apparent to me very, very early in my career was two things. Even teaching in the city that I'd grown up in, the city that I knew better than any other place in this world, I came to understand some realities about kids' lives and their backgrounds and their challenges that very few people get the opportunity to understand other than teachers. Because educators have a window into families and into communities in ways that even physicians don't. As personal as the relationship is between a physician and a patient, the relationship between educators and schools and families is even closer. It's because it's not every couple weeks or every couple months or every couple years. It's every single day. You get to understand challenges as well as triumphs that families deal with on a daily basis. You cry with them, you laugh with them. And so what became really clear to me as a really early career teacher in the New Orleans public schools was that, one, the kids that I was serving in particular came to school with tremendous challenges. At Booker T. Washington High School in the city of New Orleans, all of the kids who we served lived in one of two public housing developments. Every kid qualified for free lunch, not free or reduced lunch, free lunch. Not because there was community eligibility program, but because that was their family's income level. Very few kids had a parent who worked. These kids faced violence, unlike many of us have ever even seen in movies. Challenges that no child or adult should ever have to deal with. That was the first thing that became really clear to me. The second thing that became really clear to me is even with the tremendous challenges that those kids came to school with, We, meaning adults, in some ways did nothing to help. And very seldom was it the case because it was an adult who decided, I don't want to help these kids. In fact, I think just about everybody who shows up to work, even in high poverty, really challenging situations, shows up and does the job because they want to do the best they absolutely can by kids. But you come to realize when you work in that type of a system, that the system has been constructed in such a way that those kids continually get the short end of the stick. And the case in point for that is the kids who I was serving were some of the most vulnerable kids, not only in our city, in our state, but in our country. And they had me as their teacher. I was well-meaning, I was idealistic, but I was a very first-year teacher, and I had little training and background yet. Yet even with the system understanding the tremendous challenges that those kids faced, the system, we adults, gave them me. That is so incredibly unfair. And there's no single adult that you could pick out to say you intentionally gave this child or you intentionally gave this class of students a teacher who was not well equipped, who was not prepared to meet these kids' needs. No, that's not the decision that any adult or 5 or 10 adults made, but the system had been constructed in that way. And so it was an incredible disservice to those children. Unfortunately, there are children even in our state today who are victims of that type of system, who come to our schools with tremendous challenges, incredible challenges, the likes of which many of us could not imagine. Yet our system is constructed in such a way that inequity is perpetuated. Not because there are not well-meaning people, but because the system is not designed to provide our neediest, our most vulnerable children with what they absolutely need. That's why I got into education. That's why I stayed in education. That's what continues to drive me in the work that we do each and every day. Because as a first-year teacher, yes, I came to understand that I had a lot of learning to do, and I am so thankful for the mentors that I had in the teaching profession who helped me to become a much better teacher with a skill set that I use even to this day. But the truth is, even with the most effective teacher you can find, if you don't tackle the inequities baked into the system, even feeding more money into the system will only serve to exacerbate the inequities that exist in our state and in our country. So I begin with that because I want you all, I want everyone to have a very clear understanding of where I operate from, of who I am, of what I believe, and of why I do what I do. That's me. I'm thankful for you all being here. We want to spend some time this evening talking about the state of education in our beloved Commonwealth. The last year has been highlighted by a tremendous number of school visits. I have had the good fortune of visiting over 50 schools across our Commonwealth in 2019. Many of you have heard me say that that is absolutely the highlight of my job, having the opportunity to be on the ground in school districts and in schools learning from and learning with your kids, with you all. Many of you who are in the room, I've had the opportunity to spend time in your school districts, and I thank you for your hospitality. I thank you for the incredible work that you're doing on behalf of our kids across this Commonwealth. As we consider the work that we've done at KDE over the last year, over 2019, it's been incredible. I'll highlight just a few things, and then as I'm highlighting a couple of those things, I want to embarrass some members of our team a little bit more, because I'm very clear that the success that we have at the Kentucky Department of Education and in this Commonwealth is because of leaders who give of themselves tirelessly here at KDE and in our school districts. And so first, we've continued to do an incredible amount of work with districts facing challenges, most notably school districts that are in state management. Over the last year, we have had the opportunity to recommend to the State Board of Education that the 2 school districts that we were state managing at the time that I became commissioner would become state-assisted districts. And that's an incredible movement. That means that the authority that was with me, the authority of the superintendent and the local board of education, returns to the superintendent and the local board of education. A tremendous amount of work happened in those districts, in Breathitt County and in Menifee County. An incredible amount of leadership building and leadership capacity building happened. But it was led by our own Dr. Kelly Foster. And Kelly, would you stand? We want to recognize you for your incredible work with leading that. It was absolutely a team effort. Many leaders and staff across the department have partnered with folks in those districts to make that movement a reality, but Kelly has been the driving force organizing and leading that for many years, and I'm thankful for you, Kelly. In addition to the work with state-managed districts, Kelly and her office lead the work with our CSI schools. The Commonwealth, the Comprehensive Support and Improvement Schools, our bottom 5% of schools performing in the state. And she and her team have had tremendous progress as well with exiting schools from CSI. That's the mark for us. It's even become a part of our strategic plan. We want to know that when a school district designates KDE as the turnaround partner, that within 2 years, we're doing everything we possibly can to have that school exit CSI status. We've also implemented a brand new strategic plan. That's our Chief Performance Officer, Karen Dodd, to stand. One of the things I asked Karen to do as soon as I came on board, one of the things I asked her to do as soon as we came on board was to revamp our strategic plan. And the one reason, we didn't throw everything out, but the one reason it was imperative for me that we had to revamp the strategic plan was we had to put student achievement, student learning, as the central outcome by which we measure our success. Now, those of you who aren't as familiar with state education agencies should know that that is incredibly uncommon. State education agencies are seldom, if ever, measured by the success, by student success. And it makes sense. The reason being, state education agencies don't directly have impact on student success. In states like ours, it's local school districts. The only exception for KDE would be KSD and KSB, which we directly operate, and our ATCs. But we decided that if we were going to move the needle on student achievement, then just like our school districts, we were going to have to hold ourselves accountable for that movement. And so I'm thankful for your work with that, Karen. We have implemented that plan, not just developed it. We routinely collect data to see how we're performing on that strategic plan, and we're making good progress. Thirdly, we've had a major department reorganization. There have been lots of parts of that reorganization, but 2 that I want to highlight really quickly. One, I'll ask our Associate Commissioner Greta Hilton to stand. Greta is the first Associate Commissioner at KDE for the Office of Special Education and Early Learning, OSEAL as we call it. Previously, that work resided in the division within KDE, the Division of Learning Services. We decided that it was necessary to elevate the stature, the status of that work to the level of office, with the leadership of our special education and early learning work being so important that it needed an associate commissioner to lead that work, with an associate commissioner sitting at the executive leadership table. And so I'm thankful to Greta for her leadership in building that office and really the tremendous success that you've had thus far. Another really important feature of that reorganization has been the creation of the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. And I'll ask our first Associate Commissioner of that office to stand, Mr. Rob Akers. So the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness includes the work that used to reside within the former EPSB agency. Now that new office serves as staff to the Education Professional Standards Board. The EPSB has retained all of the authority and power that it always had, but is now staffed by the Kentucky Department of Education. And so we're thankful for the partnership of that board. It's currently led by Dr. Donna Hedgepeth, the provost at Campbellsville University, who's been a fantastic leader. Prior to that, it was headed by Ms. Sarah Burnett, a teacher and now administrator in Pulaski County. So we've had really strong leadership on the Professional Standards Board and really strong leadership in the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. We've adopted new graduation requirements. You all know we've had lots of conversation over the last couple years with stakeholders, and most recently we've had town hall meetings where we've further explained and taken feedback on those new requirements. The reason those new requirements are so important is because they're the first step towards setting a meaningful bar for high school graduation in Kentucky. Many of you have heard me say over and over again that we have one of the highest high school graduation rates in the country at 91%, but less than the national average in terms of the percentage of our kids that move into post-secondary education, and even fewer of our kids actually earn a credential in post-secondary education. Fewer of our kids are finding employment and earning a wage sufficient to take care of themselves, which required that we go back and take a look at our high school graduation requirements to ensure that as a kid receives a Kentucky high school diploma, that we can say that they have basic skills and have at least taken a step toward readiness for what comes next. We've also revised Kentucky's academic standards. Now, this is work that the department has facilitated because it's been teams of teachers from across the state who've come to the department and have worked tirelessly in the development of new academic standards in reading, math, social studies, health, physical education, and we now have brand new standards for the first time in computer science. That's been a tremendous amount of work. We have revised portions of the state accountability system, including bringing stakeholders together to revise the way we look at growth. We have implemented that new accountability system with a brand new star rating system just implemented this year. We have honored student ambassadors, high school students across the state who have partnered with us to work in their schools and their communities on closing gaps and raising the bar for academic achievement. And we have launched a teacher recruitment campaign. And on that teacher recruitment campaign, I had hopes and dreams for what it might become as a catalyst for beginning a movement for getting young people and not so young people interested in the profession that many of us love so much. It has become the Go Teach KY campaign. It resides in Associate Commissioner Rob Akers' office, and Dr. Meredith Brewer has been the leader who has really taken that on and has taken it to a next level. So please stand for us, Meredith. Thank you. Now I'm really pleased to do something that we've not had the opportunity to do before at the Kentucky Department of Education, and I think it's so appropriate that we do this at the State of Education address, as we take a look at where we are as a state with our public education system, one of the most important things I believe we can do as a state is to highlight and recognize really innovative practices in public education. Because many, if not all of you know, we have some incredible bright spots across our state. Leaders and districts that are blazing a trail, not just for Kentucky students and Kentucky educators, but across the country. And I've seen some of these leaders present and give consultation to folks across the country who want to know what they're doing. How are you breaking down barriers? How are you thinking outside of the box to serve your kids in new and innovative ways? And so we have 4 awardees for this initial award for innovation and excellence in educational leadership. And the first awardee, 2019 awardee, is the Ohio Valley Education Cooperative. Alicia Sells, on behalf of Dr. Mooneyhan, is here, and I'll call her up in a second, but I want to just say a few words about the work, the incredible work that you all have done with iLead. iLead serves Carroll County Schools, Gallatin County Schools, Henry County Public Schools, Owen County Schools, and Trimble County Schools. It focuses on the notion that students control the time, place, and pace of their learning, understand how what they're learning applies to the real world, and design their own educational experiences. And that's not just rhetoric. It's true. Students at iLead are, in fact, designing their own educational experiences. Each year, students present a digital portfolio demonstrating what they learned and how they're progressing toward a career in the field of interest. Every student has an advisor who guides them in career exploration, goal setting, education, and certification needed to meet career goals, work-based learning, college exploration, and financial aid and scholarships. And career pathways at iLead include computer science, engineering, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, technical skills, partnerships with Carroll County ATC, JCTC for carpentry, electrical systems, industrial maintenance, and mechanical maintenance. And so, Alicia, if you would come forward, and please feel free to bring your team. This reads, Innovation and Excellence in Educational Leadership Award, presented to OVEC for your visionary and innovative leadership with the iLead Academy by the Kentucky Department of Education, December 3rd, 2019. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Would you like to take the word?
I want to thank you very much. I'm usually not a crier, but this is Jenna Gray, who's our director, who works with students, and our board chair, Dr. Rob Stafford, is here. It's my honor to work with these 5 school districts who put iLead together and to have worked with them to design it, and to work with Jenna and the team at iLead to serve students. Students are starving for something different. They want to get out of that system that Dr. Lewis has talked about today and find unique ways to meet their needs. It's beyond really an urgency, and it's why I'm so appreciative of the leadership of the board, of Governor Bevin and Commissioner Lewis, and the leadership that came before you all as well, with Commissioner Holliday and Commissioner Pruitt, who enabled us to do this work. And so it has been a great journey. We've graduated our first class, 26 of them with an associate degree as they graduated from high school. So it works if you do something different, and I hope that we continue to see that acceptance of different and a push for different from the leadership in the state and our state's policymakers, because students are desperate for it. Thank you very much.
Our second awardee for 2019 is the Laurel County School Superintendent Doug Bennett. Laurel County Center for Innovation serves the students of Laurel County The principal is Dr. James Davis. The center has a focus on specializations in English, math, and technical education, and staff delivers instructional content while also integrating components connected to the student's career pathway. The student-centered school uses real-world applications to enhance learning through project development to include the 3 stages of project management, such as design, create, and demonstrate. The center features the following programs: health sciences, engineering technology, industrial maintenance technology, media arts technology, and computer information technology. So, Dr. Davis, you and whoever you'd like to bring, please come forward and accept this award. It reads, Innovation and Excellence in Educational Leadership Award presented to Laurel County Schools for your visionary and innovative leadership with the Laurel County Schools Center for Innovation by the Kentucky Department of Education, December 3rd, 2019. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I'm both humbled and honored to be with you this evening to recognize the efforts of my faculty and staff in our efforts every day to work and support student learning, student achievement. I'm very impressed with our young people. A lot of times young people get a bad rap, but I want to assure you that young people are the future. Young people are capable, they are talented, and they will do well. So thank you very much.
Our third special honoree is Meade County Schools, Superintendent Dr. John Millay. Meade County ATC serves Meade County. The principal is Nicholas Sutherland. The entire project, and project refers to the partnership between Meade County Schools, Meade County School Board, the Meade County ATC, with the Kentucky Department of Education, and really incredible partnership with Elizabethtown Community and Technical College. But this project has been about partnerships, building a premier graduate that is ready for a quality life after high school, and thinking outside the historical makeup of a high school. All 1,600 Meade County high school students have a career pathway. It's a graduation requirement for the class of 2020 and beyond to complete a pathway and earn an academic credential. 26 pathways are offered on campus, with 16 of them offered in college and career centers. The center has designed intentional space in the facility to house Skills U, which is our adult education program in the state to support individuals working on their GED to further obtain education through the Work Ready Scholarship. It has served as an invaluable tool in bringing a $1.35 billion investment to the community by Nucor Steel to help train and produce workforce. Entrepreneur Rick Huber and family donated $1 million to provide an entrepreneurship pathway and teaching component for all pathways. And in its short history of being open since 2018, the facility, hosted by Governor Bevin and his cabinet multiple times, Senate Majority Leader McConnell, congressmen, state legislators, national and international business leaders, and even the President of the United States via phone. So we're honored to have the opportunity to recognize you, Dr. Millay, and Meade County Schools. Please come forward. Innovation and Excellence in Educational Leadership Award, presented to Meade County Schools for your visionary and innovative leadership with the Meade County Area Technology Center by the Kentucky Department of Education, December 3rd, 2019.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Lewis, a member of the Kentucky Board of Education. On behalf of the Meade County Board of Education, our administration, our principals, our teachers who make it happen, and the students, of course, and the good people of Meade County, we accept this award. Our board makes a tremendous investment in innovation and leadership. So this is why it happens. And I have a great team. This is just a small representative part that we push them, and then they have wide eyes. They can't believe what we're getting ready to do, and then they make it better. They just make it better. So everything we do, they run with it. So I thank them for the work that they do to make Meade County look great. I do appreciate the leadership of the board. When we talk about closing the gap and raising the bar, I do believe that's really happening because of the investment that's being made in our community by our Board of Education. So they take education seriously, they support us, and we're proud of the work that's happening. So thank you for this award.
And last but certainly not least, our final award this year goes to Owensboro Public Schools, Superintendent Nick Brake. Owensboro Innovation Academy is a partnership between Owensboro Independent and the Daviess County Public Schools. Students from Owensboro Public Schools, Daviess County Public Schools, and McLean County Public Schools attend the school, and the principal is Beth Benjamin. The school began 4 years ago with a freshman class and has added a class each year, with the first graduating class being this past May. It is Kentucky's first school affiliated with the national school reform model, the New Tech Network, and is part of the Owensboro Independent District of Innovation Program through the Kentucky Department of Education. As part of the National New Tech Network, the Academy focuses on project-based learning, where students immerse themselves into hands-on projects as a way to actively learn valuable subject material. Dr. Brake was not able to be with us today. Dr. Matthew Constant, soon to be interim superintendent of Owensboro Public Schools, is with us. Please do come forward, Dr. Constant.
How are you, sir? Thank you.
It reads, Innovation and Excellence in Educational Leadership Award presented to Owensboro Public Schools for your visionary and innovative leadership with the Owensboro Innovation Academy by the Kentucky Department of Education, December 3rd, 2019. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Would you like to say first?
Greetings from Owensboro. I want to thank Dr. Lewis and the board for this award and bring you greetings from Dr. Brake. Dr. Brake came to our district 6 years ago and will be leaving our district here in a few days. But in that time, I guess if I could challenge other districts right now, because he stepped out. He stepped out and had a dream. And he said, let's create something different, similar to what we've heard today. We created something different. We went and leaped. We said, we don't know where this school will be yet. We're not really sure how the instruction will be delivered, but come on along. And they did. Students did. We graduated our first class of the Owensboro Innovation Academy, starting as freshmen all the way to seniors last year. They're all doing well. Dr. Lewis was the keynote speaker at the graduation ceremony, so we appreciate his making that trip for that. But things are going well. So I would just challenge the school districts out there to take the educational courage. Take that leap. We did. It's working. And just a word of thanks to the board, because the board has allowed us to have freedom. Dr. Lewis said it well yesterday. I've been with Dr. Lewis the past couple of days at another meeting. He said, ask. We will try. Ask. We will try. Well, we asked. We asked several things, and you delivered. So thank you for that. Thank you for this award.
I am so proud of the work that is happening in the 4 districts that we were able to honor today. But I want to be really clear and not lead anyone to believe that I believe that there are only 4 school districts in Kentucky that are doing really innovative work, because that's absolutely not the case. We were privileged to have the opportunity to recognize these 4 districts, and they are incredibly deserving. there are other districts that are incredibly deserving as well and deserve to be recognized, and we will recognize those districts. But I am thankful for their leadership, for their courage, and for their vision. As Dr. Constance said, it took an incredible amount of vision to step out on faith, to say we're going to create something that has not existed here before. It might work, it might not, but we're going to bring folks along and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that it provides something new and special for our kids because they deserve it. So thank you all. As we consider the progress of our public education system, just as a reminder to some and background information for others, the Kentucky public school system is comprised of 172 locally operated school districts, 1,400, almost 1,500 schools, a student count of almost 650,000 students in our public education system, a teacher count of almost 42,000 students, and 2 special schools, which we have the honor of operating here at Kentucky Department of Education, the Kentucky School for the Blind and the Kentucky School for the Deaf. In terms of the demographic makeup of the students we serve across this state, those demographics are on the slide for you. It's about 76% white, non-Hispanic, almost 11% African American, 7% Hispanic or Latino, and 6% of students who identify as another race. Over 60% of the kids in our Commonwealth's public schools would be considered economically disadvantaged, meaning that they qualify for free or reduced price lunch. That's a really important data point for us, because when we talk about the performance of economically disadvantaged kids in Kentucky, we need to be really clear that we are talking about the majority of our kids. It's the majority of our kids in our public schools. I like to frame conversations about our progress before we get into test scores by thinking about the real life outcomes of our students. Test scores are important, and we'll talk about test scores just in a moment, but I think it's important that we think first and foremost about what happens to our students as they exit our system. Because the ultimate measure of whether or not we have been successful as a public education system is whether or not our students exit our system and find success in post-secondary education and training, whether they're earning post-secondary credentials, and ultimately whether they're finding employment, ideally gainful employment, where they're making a wage that is sufficient to take care of themselves. That's what success has to look like for us. So we are blessed to have the Kentucky Longitudinal Data System operated by the Kentucky Center for Statistics in Kentucky. It is one of the most, if not the most powerful longitudinal data system in the country, which allows us to talk in very certain terms about the outcomes of our kids. So as you see, for the Kentucky Public High School graduating class of 2014, after 5 years out, we're able to talk about what those students have achieved educationally. So it's almost 44,000 students, and at the time they graduated, those graduates, 27,500 of them were deemed to be college or career ready by that version of the state's accountability system. After 5 years' time, 26% of those graduates had earned nothing past the high school diploma. Another 4% had earned a CTE credential, and those would be credentials that they earned while they were in high school. Again, emphasizing the importance of the credentials that we get to kids while they're in high school, because some of our kids are not going to enroll in post-secondary education, and so it's important that we get them everything we can while they're there. So that gives us about 30% of the class of 2014 that had not taken advantage of any or had the opportunity to take advantage of any additional post-secondary education after high school. 49%, almost 50% of the class of 2014 had some college. That means they had enrolled in college, but they had not earned any credential. That's a category of students that I often talk about as being potentially the most problematic group. Because not only are they not earning additional credentials past high school, which we know this economy requires that students earn additional credentials, but because they've actually enrolled in college and not earned anything, they've probably accumulated some debt. So they don't have a credential to be able to make more in the workplace, but they're probably paying back student loans as well. That's 50% of our kids. 3% had earned a certificate or a diploma. There are lots of certificates and diplomas available in our KCTCS system, and even some of our four-year campuses now are offering some of those programs. Some can be earned in as little as a couple of months. Others take about a year or so. 5% of the class of 2014 had earned a two-year degree, the associate's degree, and 12% had earned a bachelor's degree or above. I think your reaction to those numbers is probably similar to mine in that they're nowhere near where you would like them to be. And even more important than not having those numbers where we would like them to be, those numbers are nowhere near where they have to be if our students are going to find success in the 21st century economy. There's no way around it. The jobs that have been created in the post-recession era and are being created now require some post-secondary credential or degree. And so students who are unable to earn some credential past high school will find themselves struggling to take care of themselves. The class of 2017, we provide just for a little bit of context, but note that these students have only had 2 years out of school. So you can't compare these numbers in any way because 2017 students haven't been out long enough. But just so that you can see, after 2 years' time, less than 1% had completed an associate's degree. That's a 2-year degree. We would expect that very few, if any, of students would have completed a bachelor's degree. But the associate's degree numbers, the certificate and diploma numbers, and the some college numbers are ones that we should be watching. Taking a step back a little further to the Kentucky High School graduating class of 2011, we've had more time to take a look at how these students have progressed. So after 7 years' time, the Kentucky High School graduating class of 2011, almost 1,500 of 43, almost 44,000 students had earned a post-secondary certificate or diploma. 19,000 had some college experience, again, some college experience, but without having earned a credential or a degree. And 11,290 were just high school graduates. Moving up, I'm sorry, I went a little bit opposite order. 2,436 were awarded an associate's degree, and 9,275 of the 43,000 students had earned a bachelor's degree or higher. So we celebrate the Kentucky students who have exited our public schools well prepared, gone into post-secondary education, earned certificates, credentials, diplomas, degrees, and have moved on and are doing exceptionally well. As you know, there's no shortage of those students across our Commonwealth. But let's be really clear about these numbers. After 7 years' time, these numbers tell us that those kids are only about 30% of our graduates. It's only about 30% of the Kentucky graduating class of 2011 that has earned a post-secondary credential or degree. That at a time, again, when the jobs that have been created and are being created require post-secondary credentials and degrees. I begin with that life outcome data and not with test score data, because as you know, test score data is often dismissed. There are often folks that say we put too much emphasis on test scores. Test scores don't tell us whether or not kids are going to be successful. You have never heard from me, and you will never hear from me, that test scores should be the end-all be-all. They should not be. We should not put more emphasis on test scores than we ought to. But test scores are an important indicator. And one of the things you see from our test scores in Kentucky is that they align with the life outcomes that we see for our students. If we pay attention to what the test scores are telling us, they give us an idea of how well our students are in fact prepared to be successful as they exit the system. So no, test scores should not be the end-all be-all. And we're blessed to have the opportunity to see real data for our kids, but we cannot dismiss test scores. So let's begin by taking a look at our K-Prep performance. Elementary student performance, and this is all students in elementary grades 3 through 5 grouped together. And we have data displayed beginning at 2015 and through 2019. So when you look at that first row on this slide, you notice that from 2015 to 2019, the percentage of our kids across the state who scored at the level of proficient or distinguished has been relatively flat. We've not made much movement there. The other data point that I pay a whole lot of attention to, and you guys have heard me talk about this before, is in addition to proficient and distinguished, and possibly for me, maybe even more so than proficient and distinguished, is the novice percentages. So when we look at the percentages of our kids scoring at the novice level on our K-Prep assessments in reading, you don't see much movement. In other words, from 2015 to 2019, roughly about 20% of our students scored at the novice level. And as a reminder to you, novice performance on the K-Prep assessment means that students demonstrate little to no understanding of the content at grade level. Little to no understanding of the content at grade level. That's 20% of our students. We'll take a look at how that is subdivided into student performance groups in a second. In math, we see a slight uptick in the elementary novice performance. We've gone from 2015, about 18% of our kids scoring at the novice level, to 19% scoring at the novice level. Still relatively flat, but a small uptick. I think your reaction, again, is probably similar, if not the same as mine. It's that we want and we expect to make more progress than we've made. Moving past the overall numbers, as we take a look at elementary reading performance, kids scoring at the level of proficient and distinguished in the elementary grades, broken out by the federally required student reporting groups, you see pretty big disparities between groups. So for all students in 2019, you see 54.6% of students scoring at the level of proficient and distinguished, a little more than half. But I'll call your attention to African American students. 31%, less than a third of our African American students across the state demonstrating performance at the level of proficient or higher. I'll call your attention as well, we won't have time to highlight everyone, but I want to call your specific attention to the percentages for economically disadvantaged kids. It's 45.8% of our economically disadvantaged kids scoring at the level of proficient or higher. And remember, that's most of our kids. That's 60% of our students. And kids with disabilities who have an IEP, 34.2% scoring at the level of proficient and distinguished. One of the questions I often get from the public, I got as a professor from students, and I get from members of the General Assembly sometimes, is whether the disparities we see in race can be completely explained by income differences or even disability differences? And the answer to that question is a resounding no. They cannot. It is the interaction of income and race that are needed to explain the differences. These are not student level data, these are group level data, but just for comparison, I want to call your attention to the economically disadvantaged numbers. Of our kids in Kentucky who qualify for free and reduced price lunch, 45.8% are at the level of proficient or higher. For African American kids, it's 31%. Income does not explain that alone. Yes, income is a factor, but we are going to have the courage to acknowledge that we have to do something different to better meet the needs of kids of color in this state. The first thing we have to do is have the courage to acknowledge that what we've been doing isn't working. That's not an indictment of anybody. That's not an attack on public education. That's not an attack on teachers. It's common sense. Less than a third of our black kids are at the level of proficient or higher. Let's stop blaming each other and come to the table and think about ways, like these innovative leaders have displayed for us, think about ways that we can innovatively meet the needs of all of our kids, recognizing that meeting the needs of each and every kid requires that we do something different for different groups of kids. Equity is not equality. Providing equitable educational opportunities for kids is not providing the same thing for every kid. Equitable educational opportunities is about providing what kids need. Elementary reading performance, novice performance, you see the same gaps. 16.6% of our white students performing at the novice level, 40% of our African American kids demonstrating little to no understanding of the content at grade level. Middle school performance. You see more progress at the middle school level than we have made at the elementary school level. In reading, since 2015, at the proficient and distinguished levels, you see we've moved from 53.8% to 59.6% scoring at the proficient or distinguished level. That's not an insignificant amount of movement. It's probably the greatest movement that we've had in the system over the course of that time. And so one of the questions we should be asking about that movement is, what are we doing there? What are the practices that we've implemented? Dr. Houchins has talked about this pretty extensively. What are the practices that we've implemented at the middle school level to see the type of growth that we're seeing? How can we make those practices more systematic? And how can we potentially take some of those practices and put them into place at the elementary school level? In math, you see some movement as well. Proficient and distinguished moving from 53.8% in 2015 to 59.6% in 2019. You also see corresponding decreases in the percentages of kids scoring at the novice level in mathematics on the K-Prep examination. So going from 21% at the novice level in reading in 2015 to 19% in 2019, and then from 16% in 2015 to 14% in 2019 in mathematics. We have some NAEP data. Our 2019 most recent NAEP data shows us a similar picture to what we've seen with K-Prep data, in that there is not an incredible amount of movement. I'll call your attention quickly to the last column on this slide, the percentages of our kids that are proficient or advanced. those numbers really have not moved very much when you look at 2009 to 2019. Even without seeing the numbers, you see relatively flat lines, both for economically disadvantaged kids and for non-economically disadvantaged kids. You do see gaps between those student groups, but for both economically and non-economically disadvantaged kids, there has not been much movement over the last 5 years. And then the final test score data that we'll look at is ACT scores. Again, you don't see an incredible amount of movement. What you do see with ACT scores is some dips. But I want to give a caveat to the dips that we're seeing with the ACT scores. I've been engaged with other state chiefs across the country in conversations with our partners at ACT. And ACT have been great partners in this, but what we have been exploring is what seems to be more than incidental drops in the performance of our kids in states that do census testing with the ACT. So we are a census testing state in that we administer the ACT to all of our 11th grade students. That's one of the reasons why it's really not comparing apples to apples to compare Kentucky's overall ACT composite to the overall ACT composite of a state that is not a census testing state. Because if you're not a census testing state, the only kids that are taking the ACT are usually kids that are planning to go to college. That changes a little bit when you administer the test to everybody. And so along with some other state chiefs, led primarily by John White, the state chief in Louisiana, we've been engaging in conversations with ACT. They have engaged with Humro, a consulting firm that we also have a contract with, as well as the Center for Assessment, a group that we also consult with as well, to take a pretty comprehensive look at their practices, their scoring. And ACT has promised us that in response to the report that the Center for Assessment has produced, that they will be responding with some changes, potential changes in practices around census testing states. So I really don't have much more to say for you about that, but I do need to give you that caveat regarding the slight drop in scores that you see in the ACT. Transition readiness is an indicator in our accountability system that I believe to be incredibly important. This is the indicator that takes the place of what we used to call college and career readiness. In layman's terms, this is our state's way of designating that a student graduating from high school, a 12th grade student, is prepared to take the next step. We call that transition readiness in our new accountability system. And as you see from the slide, there are many ways that kids can demonstrate transition readiness. Personally, I believe that's a tremendous step forward for our state. I'm thankful for the leadership of the Kentucky General Assembly in creating the framework for that. I'm also thankful for the leadership of the literally hundreds of stakeholders, some of you in this room, who put an incredible amount of room in crafting our new accountability system and in thinking about what the appropriate metrics or indicators should be for determining whether or not kids should be designated as ready to transition, and thankful for the Kentucky Board of Education for their adoption of that work. But to highlight what a couple of those are, for a kid in Kentucky to be transition ready, they have to earn a high school diploma and do one of these other things. So either meeting the expectations for academic or career readiness by meeting the benchmark scores on a college admissions or college placement examination in 2 areas. They can earn a grade of C or higher on 6 hours of KDE-approved dual credit courses. Those are both Gen Ed dual credit courses and Career and Technical Education dual credit courses. They can score 3 or higher on 2 advanced placement examinations. Score a 5 or higher on 2 international baccalaureate exams that go with those courses. They can meet benchmark scores on 2 or more Cambridge Advanced International exams, or they can have a combination of those indicators. There's also a way to be designated transition ready that we call exceptional work experience. We brought together a group of superintendents about a year ago who made some recommendations to us on what they thought the appropriate criteria for that should be. They made a recommendation which we adopted of 500 hours completed over the course of a student's high school career. Students would also submit documentation of their learning that aligns with an approved career pathway, and students can be designated career or transition ready through that designation as well. The other thing I would note about that is the students' ARC committees, their admissions and release committees, their IEP teams, if they're a student with disability, has the ability to make changes to alter the requirements for exceptional work experience depending on a student's unique needs. That's a really important caveat that we can't say enough, because every time we talk across the state, we find that folks haven't heard that, and so that's really important. If you take a look at the figure, those to the left, you see a breakdown of how Kentucky's high schools have done in that new accountability system. So of the 228 Kentucky public high schools, 30 of them scored very low on transition readiness. 62 scored low. Together, that's a pretty significant number of high schools where many kids are not graduating from high school without having met one of these indicators. And I want to be really clear, these indicators, some of them are pretty simple. The one I use, for example, earning an industry-recognized credential. There are lots of industry-recognized credentials that students can earn in order to be designated as transition ready. One of them is earning a medical nurse aid certification, which students can literally earn in a couple of months. There are lots of ways for kids to be able to demonstrate transition readiness. What we find, by and large, the difference between schools, high schools that have done well with transition readiness and high schools that haven't, has been schools that have been really intentional in planning student programs. It's not a matter of income. We see schools that are from some of the poorest communities in the state where literally every single kid is transition readiness because they've met an indicator. And we see other high schools where the spending is the highest of anywhere in the state, where there could be anywhere from maybe just 25 to 30% of kids that are deemed to be transition ready. The only difference that there seems to be is how intentional schools and districts have been in planning. And so we expect to see tremendous growth on that indicator. It's a really important one. In fact, it accounts for 35% of how high schools are rated in the accountability system. Getting ready to close. But this work, the opportunity myth, many of you have been to presentations and trainings and heard us talk about some of the opportunity myth, the work of the New Teacher Project, TNTP. It's incredibly important in grounding the work that we've been doing at the agency. I'll return to something that I said at the very beginning about my own experience and my own learnings as a classroom teacher in the New Orleans Public Schools, understanding that kids come to us with incredible challenges. Depending on the school district where you serve, those challenges can be even greater. But one of the things we know from research, some Kentucky, some national, is that even when you change absolutely nothing else about a kid's life, you don't change their parents, you don't give them more income, you don't change their neighborhood, You don't do anything else except give them high quality, effective instruction at grade level. Nothing else. Just change that one variable and you see changes in academic and behavioral outcomes. Does that mean that's the only thing that's needed to erase the achievement gap? No, it's not what I'm saying. I know some folks will take that and misconstrue it and mischaracterize it and make it into that, but that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is, as public educators, there are lots of factors we do not have control over. As much as we love our kids and we want to have greater control over some of those factors, there are so many things we don't have control over. But there are some school level factors that we do have control over. And if we can buckle down and get even more focused on some of those things, like making sure every kid, regardless of their background or school district, has access to high quality curriculum and materials, making sure that they have access to high quality instruction aligned to academic standards at grade level, if we can ensure those things, we can move the needle. I'm not telling you what I'm guessing, I'm telling you what I know. I know from research across the country, I know from research here in Kentucky that looks at the behaviors of teachers and how changing teachers' behaviors, changing what we do at schools impacts kids' learning. Some of that research comes from Dr. Terry Scott, right at the University of Louisville, nationally regarded research that has impacted schools and school districts across the country. The opportunity myth research is very similar. Here's some of the data that they found in this research. Nearly 70% of high school graduates go on to college, but far fewer are succeeding when they get there. We know that in Kentucky because of our longitudinal data system. 91% of our kids graduate, only about 54% go on to college, and only 25 to 30%, depending on the year, actually earn a credential. In the nearly 1,000 lessons observed in this particular research study, and this was a national study, not Kentucky, but in the 1,000 lessons they observed, students were working on activities related to class 88% of the time, and more than half brought home A's and B's. That means 88% of the time that they were observing these lessons, kids were doing what they were supposed to be doing. There were expectations, there was work, there was assignment. The kid was doing what they were asked to do. And in most instances, they were earning a grade of A or B. But the assignments that they were working on, the work that they were doing in those 1,000 lessons, only met grade level standards 17% of the time. Now let's talk about why that's so important. Think back to our K-Prep numbers. Remember we talked about the definition of novice. Novice performance means kids demonstrate little to no understanding of the academic performance at grade level. The K-Prep assessment that kids take at the end of the year is an assessment of their learning of the academic standards at grade level. So if we don't provide them with instruction aligned to the academic standards at grade level, there is 0% chance that kids who come from disadvantaged backgrounds are going to be able to demonstrate mastery of that learning. Oftentimes because they've not been exposed to it. They could be in class, they could be busy, they could be engaged, but if they're not receiving standards aligned instruction at grade level using curriculum that is aligned to Kentucky academic standards, they will be ill-equipped to demonstrate the performance that we expect them to demonstrate when we assess them. That's not rocket science, right? So the work that we've been doing across the department has centered on work led by Krista Hall and her team around building the capacity of our teachers and leaders to deliver academic standards aligned instruction. Building the capacity of our leaders and our school-based decision-making council members in Kentucky to adopt curriculum that is academic standards aligned. Because if the curriculum you adopt at the school level is not standards aligned and it's not high quality material, the kids will not be able to demonstrate the performance we're asking them to demonstrate. Friends, I believe the greatest educational inequity in our system today is differential access to high quality curriculum and effective instruction. It is the greatest educational equity issue that we have. Yes, funding equity is important. I've advocated for funding equity along with many of you. Advocated for record funding in early childhood education, full day kindergarten, career and technical education. But if anybody expects me to stop talking about the reality that we have to ensure that every kid, particularly our most vulnerable kids, have access to standards aligned instruction and effective instruction, that's not going to happen. Because the research is clear, that's what they need, it's what we have to do, and the only way that happens is if we change adult behavior. So TNTP found 4 resources that influence a school's experience and outcomes, and we believe these: consistent opportunities to work on grade-appropriate assignments, strong instruction, deep engagement in what kids are learning, and teachers who hold high expectations for students and believe they can meet grade-level standards. I'll say just a word about number 4, because number 4 is one that sometimes educators take offense to. And it's not intended to offend anyone. There's not an educator, I believe, in Kentucky who walks into a classroom and says, I'm going to have low expectations for my students. But when you survey teachers across the country, one of the things you find teachers do say that is evidence of this is that they believe the academic standards adopted at the state level are appropriate. They believe it is what we're supposed to be teaching at that grade level. But many teachers, a disproportionate percentage of teachers, believe their kids are not equipped to be exposed to it. It's not because they don't love them. It's not because they don't want the best for them. Sometimes what we don't realize is even for kids who have not received all of the instruction that we want them to have preceding it, exposing them to the grade level content with support is the best instruction we can actually provide for them. Because more often than not, the research shows, it's not my idea, the research shows that kids rise to the occasion. And if you don't provide them exposure to the content at grade level, there is zero chance they can demonstrate that they have mastered it. So in conclusion, let's talk about Kentucky. I only have a minute left. I was going to talk about Mississippi's growth, which I encourage anybody to take a look at. If you have Mississippi's growth over the last really 5 years, maybe 10 years, has been pretty incredible. They're doing some really important work, particularly around coaching teachers and building teachers' capacity to be able to deliver high-quality instruction using great materials in reading and math in particular. So I'd encourage you to take a look at it. But let's take a look at some Kentucky schools in terms of performance. One of the things I hear about our accountability system in Kentucky, which could not be further from the truth, is that we have an accountability system where unless you serve a disproportionately high number and percentage of kids who come from high income backgrounds, you can't do well. And the truth is, I mean, don't believe me, go and check the data for yourself. There are schools across this Commonwealth who serve incredibly high percentages of kids who come from low-income backgrounds who are doing quite well in Kentucky's accountability system. And there's two big reasons for that. Three. One is they've had really, really strong leadership. I've not been to a school or a district across this state, and as I've told you, I've been to quite a few. I've not been to one that's making serious movement in student achievement or closing gaps that did not have strong leadership. Never seen it. Now, I have seen the opposite. I've seen schools where there's strong leadership and you're not seeing the results that you want to see yet. That takes time. But I've never seen a school making movement without strong leadership. So that's one. The second is we have an accountability system that balances some of the things that would otherwise punish schools that serve low-income kids. It's no secret in Kentucky and across the country that socioeconomic status tends to be correlated with absolute student achievement. It's no secret. For that reason, in Kentucky's accountability system, 35% of a school's rating at the elementary and middle school level comes from student growth. So you have schools in Kentucky whose absolute performance and achievement is nowhere near where we want it to be, but they're making tremendous growth. They're moving kids from one place to the next year after year, and this accountability system recognizes that growth. At the high school level, there's not growth, but there's the transition readiness indicator that we talked about. So yes, student achievement is a part of it, but at the high school level, 35% of it comes from whether or not you are moving kids toward being prepared to do something next. And for that reason, you have schools across this Commonwealth that serve disproportionately high numbers and percentages of kids from low-income backgrounds that score very high in Kentucky's accountability system. These are just a few examples. Simmons Elementary in Woodford County, which I brag on because it's my daughter's school. Simmons Elementary has almost 75% of its kids that come from low-income backgrounds. Almost 75%. But if you take a look at the accountability data, you see high proficiency, that's reading and math performance. You see medium separate academic indicator performance, that's social studies, science, and writing. And you see high growth. And if I were to pick any indicator for elementary and middle schools, the growth one is the one that's most important to me because it tells me whether or not you're moving kids from one place to the next, regardless of how they come to you. 75% of kids from low-income backgrounds. 3-star school, that's not bad at all. Cochran Elementary in Jefferson County serves kids 81, almost 82% of kids from low-income backgrounds. It's a 3-star school, but it has a different performance profile than Simmons did. You take a look at Cochran's performance, you see low scores in proficiency and low scores in the separate academic indicator. But you see very high growth. Means even though kids are coming not at the place where they want to be, where we want them to be, where they should be, something they're doing at Cochran is moving kids. The accountability system rewards them for that, and they're a 3-star school. McNabb Elementary. It's not a 3-star school, but I put it here for a really important reason. Take a look at the percentage of economically disadvantaged kids at McNabb Elementary. 94%. 94%. There are some across our state who would say that a school that has that percentage of kids from low-income backgrounds has no way to do anything except be a one-star CSI school. It's not. It's neither CSI, meaning it performs in the bottom 5%, nor is it a one-star school. You see low performance in proficiency. You see low performance in the separate academic indicator, but you see medium growth. It's not extraordinary growth, but they're growing kids. Kids are moving. The accountability system rewards it, and they're a 2-star school. And then finally, no, 2 more. I got to visit this school not too long ago, Gamale Elementary in Monroe County. Superintendent Thompson and her team. Extraordinary growth again. 75% of kids from economic disadvantaged backgrounds, and take a look at their proficiency in separate academic indicator. Very high. Very high. And they're a 5-star school. The last one is also a 5-star school with 87% of kids who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. 87%. They're not a 3-star school or a 4-star school, they're a 5-star school. So the notion that we have concocted some scheme to punish schools for serving higher percentages of kids that come from low-income backgrounds is foolishness. It's excuse-making. There are too many examples across this Commonwealth of teachers and leaders and stakeholders who are flat out getting it done. They're doing the work. They're not where they want to be, but they're moving kids and they're making progress. And to make significant changes in what we do in the school building to meet kids' needs. That's not about indicting people. It's not about attacking people. It's about being grown-ups and realizing that kids' futures, their fates, their lives are dependent on our ability to be grown-ups and do the work we're supposed to do together to improve learning for our kids. It can happen, it does happen. There's proof in this room, there's proof across this Commonwealth, and I'm thankful for each of you. I'm thankful for the stakeholders, the leaders, the teachers, the parents, the community stakeholders, the business partners who give so selflessly of themselves for the benefit of our children. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to working with you moving forward. Thank you.